A new report from the Equi think tank has found that Muslim-led youth organisations are making a major impact, saving the UK an estimated £30 million a year by helping young people turn away from violence and crime. The study highlights how these community-based initiatives are offering mentoring, counselling and positive role models, combining faith and compassion to support vulnerable young people. Joining us live is Dr. Jennifer Egert, Director of Policy and Research at Equi and one of the authors of the report. Jennifer, assalamu alaikum to you.
Hi, Amir. Walaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. Now, what are the key findings, Jennifer, from your report on Muslim-led youth work in the UK?
Yeah, so the report that we wrote focused on British Muslim responses to youth violence in the UK. And the research that we conducted for the report at Equi, it showed that British Muslim-led initiatives across the country, from Edinburgh all the way to East London, they play a really, really important role in tackling youth violence, but their role is often overlooked. And the report also showed that we cannot really afford this oversight. So if we look at the numbers of teenage deaths as a result of knife crime, for example, the UK has seen a rise of more than 140% in those numbers. So we're really looking at a youth violence crisis across the country. And in the report, we reviewed the activities of just 7 British Muslim organizations in different parts of the UK. We found that they fill critical gaps that are often left by austerity cuts. We also show in the report that these organizations reach over 45,000 young people each year. They save the state and ultimately the taxpayers, so all of us, £30 million every year. And for every £1 that is invested in this kind of work, you see a return of over £5 worth of activities. So that's really, really strong impact that these organizations are making every day to young people and to communities across the country. We found in the report at Equi that the support that British Muslim organizations provide is holistic. There is a really strong focus often on long-term mentoring, on emotional support, education, on the creation of safe spaces for young people and their communities. The work is really deeply rooted in local communities. It's proactive. There's a focus on prevention, and trust by communities plays a really, really big role. The work is often sustained by volunteers, which means that effectively, even when formal funding is not available, these organizations, they can continue to support and work with communities. And this is really a level of deep embeddedness in local context and a level of trust that is hard to reach through statutory services, through state agencies alone. You really need community work for that.
It's fascinating, the statistics that you just shared there, Jennifer. 45,000 individuals that have benefited from just from 7 Muslim-led organisations you mentioned, which is fascinating, and £30 million a year, saving and taking young people away from violence and crime. It's fascinating, amazing, and much needed. You mentioned that these things are normally overlooked. What do you put that down to? Why do they not get the attention and recognition that you would think they should receive?
Yeah, so to our knowledge at Equi, this is the very first report that looks at the contribution that specifically faith-based British Muslim organizations are making. So there is often literature on community organizations more generally, which I suppose goes hand in hand with a much bigger appreciation of notions of ethnicity and sometimes maybe race as well, rather than faith. So faith, unfortunately, in large parts of the UK, which is an increasingly secular society, it tends to be a bit of a taboo topic. It's something that people tend to be a bit scared of sometimes. There was a famous politician who a couple of years said that we don't do faith in this country. Faith and politics don't mix. So this is a very widespread attitude that people have. But I think what people, and our research really showed this, what people are overlooking is that ultimately faith-based organizations are community organizations.
Yeah.
And just because they draw their inspiration and their motivation to a large extent from faith-based teachings, for example, scripture, right? It might be Quran for Muslims, or for Christian organizations, it could be the Bible and so on. That doesn't mean that they don't offer really valuable and impactful services to communities. And our research, the research that we conducted here at ECWI, really showed that. I mean, we just went through the numbers, right? £30 million saved to the state each year by just these 7 organizations. I mean, that's an incredible number.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really something that we need in this country to keep young people and our communities safe. And I think what we also need to bear in mind in this context is that these organizations, they don't just work for Muslims. That's
yeah, of course.
That's a preconception that people sometimes have, that, oh, you're writing a report on British Muslim response to youth violence, so people just make the assumption that this is work that just benefits Muslims, but this is not the case. These organizations, they all reported back to us, and we have the evidence that they work with diverse communities across the UK, regardless of faith, regardless of ethnicity, race, gender. They're really here for all of us, and they really help to keep all of us and our young people safe.
Yeah, it's wonderful work. It really is. Why do you think faith-based approaches can be more effective at engaging young people, for example?
Yeah, so during the research that we conducted at ECWI, we found that faith-based action works because it really meets young people where they are. So these organizations, the British Muslim organizations that we spoke with, they don't just offer practical support, but emotional support, cultural support, spiritual support. So they really approach their work from a holistic perspective. And this is just something that often tends to be particularly well aligned with faith approaches, with faith-based approaches. And I think we need to bear in mind that for many people in the UK, we might be an increasingly secular country, but that doesn't mean that faith is not important to people anymore. And for many people across the country, faith is not just a belief system, it's really a source of identity, of belonging, of moral guidance. And the research that we conducted at ECWI really showed that when support is delivered through spaces and through organizations that are trusted by communities, which is often the case with mosques, for example, or with gurdwaras or temples or churches and so on, the support that these organizations provide, it just feels relevant, it feels respectful. We found that a lot of these faith-based organizations, they tend to operate with a really deep sense of duty and of continuity. They're part of the community fabric, right? So they don't just work with the community. They don't just work for the community. They are the community. And this kind of youth work and youth violence prevention work that is really deeply embedded into communities, it just tends to be really, really impactful because there's a consistency. This consistency helps build trust. And you just don't get that when you parachute external organizations into a context that they just don't know that well, that they are just not that deeply embedded in. And when we speak about the prevention of youth violence, trust is just so important for this kind of work.
Of course. Yeah, it's imperative for it to be successful. What more, Jennifer, do you think policymakers could do to support or recognise these organisations?
Yeah, so that's a really important part of our work. At ECWI, we are a think tank, so we conduct research, but then we don't stop there. We don't just let the research catch dust on a shelf. We really take the research to policymakers, and because ultimately our aim is to bring about policy change. And so when we speak about what we would like, what we at ECWI, based on the research that we've conducted, what we would like policymakers to do is really 3 key things. The first one is that it's about acknowledgement and inclusion. So EQUI is calling on policymakers to acknowledge the scale and the value of faith-based work aimed at preventing youth violence. There's a need for data. We need robust data on faith-based providers who work in this space. We need long-term impact studies. Our report only provided a glimpse into this work, right? And already we saw so much deep impact, £30 million saved to the taxpayer. But what we really ultimately need is long-term studies that look at the trace impact over time. And we need faith actors to be included into existing partnerships. So when you have multi-agency partnerships aimed at helping prevent youth violence, we need faith-based actors to be included in that. And related to that is the second point, and that's to protect the charitable status of faith-based organizations. So we really need government to help protect their status, give them the space to keep on doing the work that they do every day, and to recognize that faith-led organizations are not just fringe actors, they're really frontline partners when it comes to the prevention of youth violence. And then the third point, really, really important point, is that we need investment into this work. We need investment into work. The work is happening. It's happening on the ground. It's happening every single day, often sustained by volunteers who run these charities. But what we kept on hearing from the people that we engaged with as part of the research that we conducted at EQUI was that they struggle to access funding, and not just one-off grants, but sustained long-term funding. Sustained long-term funding allows these organizations to build their capacity, to build partnerships with diverse organizations working in the same space, working for the same aims. It allows them to build collaborations and to plan long-term. And this is really what is needed. We really need to recognize that if we're serious about prevention, then we must support and we must resource the people who are already doing this work with so much impact on the ground.
Jennifer, thank you so much for your insights into the report. The report is available on your website. I'll give that out in just a second. But I really want to thank you for your time this evening and for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Dr. Jennifer Egert there, Director of Policy and Research at EQUI. I believe it's equi.co.uk, but you can just search for EQUI, EQUI, and you can download the report that she's just taken us through. Fascinating work.
Dottie McLeod at breakfast on BBC.